Okay, hello everyone. Could silence be a door towards the eternal? And what is the word eternity or the eternal? What does it mean? What does this suggest? I don't know why I feel myself drawn to subjectivity more than objectivity. I feel it's as if a creature evolves, and in its evolution it changes its modes of its direction changes. So you can say evolution based on more data this creature can acknowledge changes direction or changes intensity, which inevitably changes its direction. There is a quote by Jalaluddin Maulana Rumi where he says silence is the language of God. All else is poor translation. What he means that what he means is that the world of noise, the world of music, the world of sound evokes the subjective. So we can say, if I move my hand, that's a sort of motion, but if I make noise, those sounds are a sort of motion. But they are a sort of motion that can be uniquely interpreted. You know, it's as if there isn't only body language, but there's a language between minds. And so seldom is this set, but there is also a language between souls. And what I mean by that is that the soul is the presence that is watching the personality manifest. These are, of course, my observations so far. This life is so grand that it's as if you cannot make an idea the truth. That is one truth I am aware of. That language is a ship. It is something our attention is journeying through as in the moment. I've kind of noticed human life to be in an interesting position because the more you rely on the unknown and go towards your unconscious and intuition, the more you begin to see everything is in the will of the cosmos, as if things are happening in accordance to some intelligence, and we are either associating that intelligence to ourselves or to the world around us. And so what that means is, if you, for example, imagine a giant white lion, glowing white kind of lion running in the streets, giant lion, like skyscraper size. So your mind has visualized that, yet that content is not objectively valid. It's as if objectivity is a platform where there's a lift off to a higher dimension into subjectivity, and then from subjectivity there's a lift off into a higher dimension, but that higher dimension has to return to the source of the movement and the source of the noise. So when Jalaluddin Maulana Rumi says silence is the language of God, all else is poor translation, what he means is that language's intention is to separate the world. But truth is requires a reverse engineering kind of attention to. Kind of like, in a strange way, Mr.Within is saying reverse engineer your attention back into is the future. But I also care about how the present moment applies. And I don't know what to say, but it's like the present moment allows us to experience a singular domain. Like literally in one moment, you're experiencing one kind of life. But as you go through different moments, you in some sense experience different lives, which means your mind is constantly fragmenting senses of time. So we have to take into consideration every moment that we exist. It's kind of like from one point a line is drawn, and then to another point, and then another line is drawn, another line, another point, and eventually it's like this direct arrow of time where we're moving between various points of self. So if time was a horizontal arrow going the right direction, the points on these, every point on this line is like a sense of self of the being as they navigate through the ideological identity. It's very fascinating. We're creatures that are using sounds to be thoughts. I want to speak about something that is found in yoga, and it is called Bhakti Yoga. And Bhakti Yoga is very similar to the intentions of the monotheistic religions. Because Bhakti Yoga looks for the supreme love. What that means is every human being is alone to some degree. They may have a sort of union, a sort of group they go and be a part of for some time, but eventually everybody sleeps alone. Haven't you noticed? And so we wake up alone as well. And what that means is the responsibility of our inner realities is for ourselves. That means the reason you see what you see is because that is the design. It has been authorized. So you see, the soul requires authorization because it is limited by the mind. And the mind is a character in a story trying to be a body forever. That's the issue. You see, it's as if we wonder, why is the concept of death being seen as death? We can see it as a discontinuity, and we can see that because the subjective reality wants to continue and it desires and it feels and all this, you know, so we can say the moment of death is when the subjective life has not realized its own hollowness yet. There are many truths that silent bears. There's certain things that I could be poetic about endlessly through the abstraction of the mind, but I'm telling you, it's like silence is the only gatekeeper to that moment. In silence, the world awakens. In silence, the world sleeps. In silence, the world is the transcendent. So what if I told you, whether you like it or not, the whole universal sector is evolving? What are you going to do about that? You see, you have to adjust. You have to accept your world for what it is and march. And not march against cruelty. You see, this is the era where, let me tell you something, one of the most incredible life lessons that I learned from chess. That the main strategy was to let the enemy make the first mistake. And then hold on to the lead or whatever. And then I realized how hilarious. It's as if we are waiting for the right opportunity, not realizing our eyes are here to redesign the system. It's like, would you rather hear a new idea, or would you rather hear an idea you've heard before? And if you want to hear a new idea, what is calling you? What is pulling you? What is attracting you towards the unknown revelation of the greater dimensions of your vision? You see, I find the human position, by nature, we are poetic. Let me tell you why. Because we are multidimensional. Poetry is when language is beginning to be shaken. Some of the greatest poets you read on this earth, they are shaking language. These poets that I often quote, this is another title you can give them, they were the language shakers. The emergence of attention as not just the purely objective phenomena. I feel we're heading that way. Excuse me. You become playful with your mind. Let me tell you what it is. Most of us think that we have to act in a certain way, in a certain kind of behavioral manner to fit into the social puzzle. Okay? But let me tell you, what if society is your leader because it sets the standards? And what if society's standards are not aligned to the true presence and intelligence of the human being? What if I told you the world, all political systems in the world, they do not see who they are governing. Therefore, they must work with law. And so the development of law was divine. If you notice that it's like law was one of those concepts that it came from the supernatural. The fact that we have laws, subjective, invisible boundaries. We have edges. And so what if I told you the edge of your world is behind your eyes as well? But from that edge starts the subjective reality. It's like a 90-degree angle. I feel like telling you a story. And I want to tell you the story of Rustam. This arises from the poetic works of Ferdowsi, which in some sense has set into motion in the minds of most Persian people a sort of mythological level of reality. You see, if you notice something in the mythology, all mythologies surpass the limitations of normality and modernity. So when we go in the ancient world, they might have been more primitive, but they had certain freedoms due to less self-restriction. In 2019, the human being is under attack. It is not under attack by anything objective. It's not like there's a war. Thank God, externally, we have reached a sort of civility, even though there's a lot of messed up shit happening in the world. But I'm saying, like, we have reached a certain amount of balance and a stable ground. But what it is it's a war of an internal value. So you see, we are creatures that we don't just eat food, we also consume value. And what that means is we want this moment that we're alive to have value, kind of like a candle where the light flame of the candle looks in the eyes of the writer and he says, give my life meaning, write that great novel. You see, so what I'm saying is in the passage of time is where we wonder what is happening to the value of the moment. It has always been like this. It's very funny. It's kind of like finding out that the mind doesn't have a gravitational pull. I mean, ideas do. Let me say it like this, actually. I'm going to kind of reclaim that. I'll tell you like this. Imagine, as scientifically and astronomically, we know that there is a black hole in the sky. And the reason we call it a black hole because it has an event horizon where when light goes in there, gravity is so intense that it can't get out, evidently, right? So anybody who falls in a black hole feels like they're endlessly falling in, I don't know where, I don't know. It's too dark to see. You know, there's too much dark matter and energy around. What can we do? And so what I'm trying to say is that just like how there's an external concept of a black hole, even there are theories that suggest that the whole universe, like all these galaxies are spinning around one giant universe. It's as if one giant black hole we're all spinning around. This may sound strange, but there's a huge suggestion that we are thoughts in a brain right now. We are thoughts in a cosmic mind. Now, this cosmic mind, you can give it shape, you cannot give it shape. And it can drive you into many directions, but I am telling you, when you really deal with truth, you cannot be your future self and you cannot be your past self. Literally, it's as if you find yourself in the presence of the ultimate truth and you try to relate to it with your past self, and suddenly the ultimate truth slaps your past self out of your hands, out of the hands of your consciousness. You run into the future and suddenly it slaps the future out of your hands. What it means is you're left with, I would say it in some sense, your naked self. Not just you're physically like like you can have clothes on, but I'm just saying, like, what I mean by the naked self, I mean before your mind had compartmentalized between honesty and dishonesty, between visible and invisible, between known and the unknown, there was a pure moment of being. What that means is language is a subtler dimension. I can see it now properly. Because there was silence first. This silence is the emergence. Like, how can I tell you? From the silence of this child's mind first, psychologically trying to be the world, it's as if our minds become the world first, and then we are extracted as identities from that world. So there's a subjective world to a subjective self. That means if you have an idea of yourself right now, that idea is not just there hovering alone. It has a world where it's defined from. So a lot of creativity, I don't know, like what I'm trying to say is, like, the divine is kind of like chess, where you let the divine move first. You let life's challenges make their first move. As they make their first move, you see how their mind is working. As you see how their mind is working, you see to the greatest chaos there is a great order watching, and to the greatest order there is a great chaos watching. That means the archetype of the bad guy is so much deeper in our minds than if we ever saw a bad guy or not. And so what I'm saying is, it is theatrics. It's as if people's imagination is casting the external world into the roles limited by their experiences. So what it is that the true sign of intelligence, as Aristotle says, it is the sign of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it. That means the true intelligent position is not to be anything at all. Do you see? We don't make the first move, which means we don't define the self. We just experience. Like, how can I tell you? Experience brings forth data to you, and your brain, as a data processing phenomena, it in some sense absorbs that data, transforming the whole value of the whole system. Kind of like you're making soup and you just put a bit of salt in it. That salt is going everywhere in that soup, you know. We got to give a shout out to the chefs of this world, giving us a taste of what heaven's stairs are like. It's the emergence of the new. This is something that I denied. I subconsciously disbelieved. A person can, like, literally, you can ask someone and they could give you an answer, but how much that answer, how much that momentary projection is meaningful to them and true, has to do with how much they're willing to actually live in this life with a sort of clarity, right? So eventually you realize that life is not about just a sort of normal hamster wheel of a function. Your mind deserves your attention, and that attention is supreme. And once the supreme is present, the personality is not limited. What I'm saying is, we are right now under the assumption as a civilization that we are thoughts. We are brains that are projecting themselves as thoughts, and at the core of the brain, we are just a hallucination of electrons as a person for some time. That means our fears of extinction are hollow because this is all a hallucination of atoms, you know? But the thing is, we are not just a thought. We can't be if we are aware of ourselves as thoughts. I find that what we are is the intersection of the known dimensions of existence and the unknown dimensions of experience. That means we're given a certain framework. You see, science has a sort of might to it, MIGHT, a sort of mighthood. You have to first trust that the mind has an ability to access a better vision. Now, when I say you have to do this, I'm not. Nothing can be enforced in nature. Galileo kind of set this in stone when he said, "You can't teach anyone anything. You can make them realize it within themselves." What does that mean? That means you have a certain reality of your own. You're in your reality bubble, and it is literally your responsibility. Just like how you take, like the human being takes showers, they have to, in some sense, shower their mind with new endeavors. You see? Or you kind of, it's like, who was that philosopher? I forget his name, but it was like, habit is the decay of the mind. Right? So what that means is too much repetition makes the world lifeless. And that's the only issue with technology. You see? It is where we will end up if we are not paying attention, that the value of life is not in self gratification, it is in world gratification. Because that is the greater game to play. You'll see, you'll reach a sort of mindset where you're like, okay, what now after you've attained everything? And then you'll see whatever is left. It's as if it's like all those good people in the world, they got right there and they reached the kind of heaven's gate, and let's say a divine voice was like, all right, you're all going to heaven, but you guys have to wait. And people were like, why do we have to wait to get into heaven? He's like, because everybody else has to also get in line first, and then we open the doors. A kind of unique idea that it's not just enough to enlighten yourself. What's occurring is that they're trusting the unknown, and then their experience is moving with rhythms that is more aligned to their intelligence. So right now I'm speaking from my world and you're speaking from your world. Or let me say it like this, I'm speaking from my world view, how the vision of the world has in some sense entered my attention, and you too. Okay? But as we're communicating, this is a kind of bridge, for example. Right? So it's like the light bulb turned on first before Edison built it. It turned on in Edison's mind as an unknown possibility, and through his effort, he actualized. So the whole point of life is you kind of see the contribution you can give, and you attempt to actualize, and then realign with the feedback. Pretty much, it's kind of like we're all attempting to advance our civilization, are we not? It's like, how advanced can you be as a person if your whole world, if it's like when the whole world is suffering and you're in joy, it's like, good for you, man. But there's more. That's my point. Because it's not that we have to care about saving people's lives. We have to realize that each mind has such a unique DNA that if their mind had an ability to just wonder about a global problem, it would have to give a reaction and a response. You see, this is why as long as you're conscious, you are connected to a field of intelligence. You see, so the whole point of the classifying knowledge is just a cultural game. I've written a science fiction novel where in this science fiction novel it's the year 5025, and the book is deep, but I'm not going to get too much into it. And pretty much there's this main character named Rasoul, and Rasoul is in some sense he's walking in New York and in the Wall Street area, but in the year 5025 Wall Street has become a place of like the most holiest place where like these kind of unique religious kind of archetypes are kind of washing the streets. And so what happens is this man Rasoul is the way I've designed this character in this novel is that this character, it's as if because he's how can I tell you, it's as if nature, he is in any obstacle that comes to him, the world solves. Anyways, so this suddenly there comes this golden kind of like Ferrari looking car, and in it there's a robot in a like a business suit, in a professional Wall Street business suit. Okay, golden robot. The robot is golden too, and in some sense he has like a black business suit, like as if you'll imagine him being like a big Wall Street guy. And so what happens is Rasoul, he has a kind of dialogue with the cosmos behind his eyes. The whole point, the novel is called The Messenger of Giants, and what that means is this man behind his eyes, he hears the voices of galaxies. Do you see? So, but anyways, this robot kind of comes out, and the robot can see Rasoul. And the robot sees him, and Rasoul suddenly gets as if like a download, like some instant knowing suddenly about who this robot is, and he realizes his name is Astros, and he's like a CEO of in this novel I have something called the robotic realms. Robots were kind of treated as second-class citizens, but they've kind of reached, human beings got so enlightened that they kind of became the angels that the robots can't see. But really, really rich businessmen, they can kind of pay and in some sense have dialogue with these kind of human beings, which are like elevated beings in their eyes, enlightened beings. So anyways, what happens is Rasoul speaks to this robot, and the robot starts and says, I'm Astros, and I don't know what I exactly wrote. But it's kind of like the conclusion of the dialogue was there was a moment where Rasoul, the robot says, what is the purpose of existence aside from following a program? And I don't know what Rasoul says. He says something like, he speaks suddenly binary, but it's, man, I wish I could read this. I don't have it here. Long story short, the robot suddenly realizes it's as limited as it has comprehended its program. That means it's like you can't escape the program, but how you are in the program can infinitely change. And eventually, once you relate that to certain kind of higher dimensional patterns, what I mean by that is that for the religious mind, a lot of people are religious on this planet. What do they see? They see a sort of multidimensionally at work, but their multidimensionality is limited to the limited words that were the authorization of God. So it's as if for a religious man, the words in the Bible, Torah, and Quran, they are like the most important words in all of existence. And it's totally fine if all the other words were kind of dismantled, because this holds within, this ideology holds within it the ultimate truth. You see? So on some level you can say it's ideological possession, but check this out. At the same time, if the person is not ideologically possessed, if the person is an actual good guy and realizes you gotta have some sort of thought structure to entertain in this world, why not I try this? You see? And so these people who try this, the reason they're doing it is because there's no actual method to explore the mind. It's like scientists have to now go to philosophers and ask them to, in some sense, start bridging scientific experimentation with certain archetypal values of what a secular society could look like. It's like people want to be as much responsible as there's something in it for them, and that limits the ability of the civilization. It's like anytime you see a great idea, it's like a plant that you have to water, you know? To be honest, a lot of life is world building, and you build that world with your alertness and attention. Because language is generated in the moment, kind of like how the caveman sparked fire. So every time a person speaks, they're kind of sparking a sort of fire. You cannot say a sentence without a sort of dynamism and collision and dualistic kind of value. It's as if we need duality to be alive as a thought. Right? This is why you cannot ultimately break the world's illusion. It's like rather than truth, the kind of becomes like rather than the illusion winning over the truth, or the truth winning over the illusion, it becomes like the yin yang balance. You realize like 50% of reality is materialistic, but in that 50% materialistic kind of reality, in that side of the yin yang symbol, there's also a dot. Right? So it's like we have to have a bit of imagination, or how would we talk to one another? You know what I mean? Like when somebody says something, not everybody has access to all data all the time, even though we have Google on our phones. So when a person speaks, they're communicating certain images in accordance to their site, their norms, and what behavior is. So for me, it's like, believe it or not, this is like, I don't know what to make of this, but like it takes energy to talk to someone. You know, if you want to really, if you care about that person and actually want to listen to them, it takes a readjustment of how you are actually going through a sort of rhythm of your own. So the mind of people, it's all about attention, and where your attention goes, that's where the world becomes beautiful. It opens up. So think of it this way, that it's all just language programs. After idol worship, we started worshiping words. Now, some people may ask, okay, so what do we do next? Where are we going after we've worshipped words? You know, and Mr. Within will say we're going to go to worshiping experience, direct experience. But the issue is when we come to worship our direct experience, it's a collective field. We reach the edge of individualhood. And it's like, what do you want me to say about that? It's like, it's the edge of the thought, it's the edge of the subjective realm, which comes to the pure presence of the moment, and literally that all ideology that associates to emptiness and chaos, and all ideology that associates with fullness and order, you realize they all come down to one singular point, that the moment is the moment, regardless of any storyline. It's when cause and effect stop being cause and effect. They become one moment. It's like cause effect becomes cause dash effect. As if it's one moment. It's one circle where the duality is in. Yin and yang are in one moment, or like kind of fighting. You see, to be honest, it has to do with individualism and how much the society takes into consideration individualism. We're living in a world right now where we have the concept of, for example, celebrities, and of course society has a sort of hierarchical structure. When I say hierarchical structure, literally it has levels like a video game. Okay, and these levels are dictated by certain resources and certain values. And many people are looking for a treasure in this world, and many of them are willing to forget who they are to even find the treasure. And those who tend to be like that get devoured. You see, desire is a kind of evocation. I'm afraid to say it, but it's like, when I say desire, I mean it's like when you want something, you animate intelligence in the moment. There's a consequence to that. It's kind of like, there's this quote by Rabindranath Tagore. He says, "I slept and dreamt that life was joy." He ran after heaven as a kid. He says, "I awoke and I saw that life was service." He opened his eyes as a man and he saw the world requires all that it can. And so in that moment, he says, "I awoke and saw that life was service." And he says, "I acted, and behold, service was joy." That sentence, "service was joy," means that once you fulfill what is honestly true for you, you consciously transform. That means literally right now, there's a sort of form of you as a physical being, which is with atoms and all this, an atomic structure to your existence, a biological cellular structure to your existence. But at the same time, Mr. Within is saying, just like how there's a biological cellular structure, there is also a subjective archetypal structure. And this means that your mind has been so advanced and ahead of its time that it has created segments and moments in time which it has called memories. And it has in some sense created around these memories whirlwinds of unconscious movements, in the sense that the memory can be brought forth at any time. How insane is that? If somebody asks you, "Hey man, remember what you did yesterday?" you can suddenly bring up that memory. But when you're not even thinking about it, the question may never arise. So we are creatures that require to be mirrors of one another's minds. You see, and the only way is that if civilization becomes honest. This is kind of a profound personal story I can tell you. Me, my brother, and my father, we I remember we were in Iran, and my father went to speak to a mayor of kind of like a sort of an outside town of the capital of Tehran, of Iran. And so anyways, we were in the room and there was this kind of incredibly educated mayor for this kind of like, you know, distant town. And I remember my brother asked him a question, and he said that, what do you think society needs? And the man looked at us for a second, took off his glasses, and he said, the mayor, he said it needs honesty. Literally, people are not being honest, and so society is fucked up. That was his point. And what that means is that immediate honesty is required. And I've sat down many nights, you know, wondering about what is the way. You know, it's as if I'm not even trying to do anything right now. I'm just wondering what is the question to ask before I try to find the answer and the solution. Before I believe in something, what is it that I'm looking for? And so that question is an unknown attention in the moment. That unknown attention is the only pathway to divinity, which means you have to let go of your thoughts to realize what you are. And when I say let go of thoughts, I'm not being too. You have an intelligence right now where it's kind of like a very cool way of saying this is like your mind is like a sword and shield. Right now, I am using my voice as a sword. Do you see? I am because I am expressing. I am going with it. You see, I am moving with the expression. So, in some sense, the ability of the mind to express and for the ability of the attention to bring forth an effort that brings manifestation. And you can use your mind as a shield. And what that means is when you receive from the world. The shield, if you notice its design, it is only there to defend against impact. And what that means is you right now are a known entity. You're in some sense, you are basing who you are in accordance to what you know, right? And so what I'm saying is the shield is what is guarding that knowledge, your consciousness and rationality, and in some sense your pure attention in the moment before any ideological movement is you. Okay, it's as if like it's like, sorry to break it down, but before you were named, it was the eyes of the cosmos looking out through, you know, looking throughout your eyes. We were an unnamed intelligent part of nature. You see, and then we have stepped into the language simulation. We have not just made cities, we have also made cities of thoughts. Many towers of knowledge have been built since the beginning of time. Seeing how enslaved the world was. It's kind of like a very difficult situation. I kind of see how the Buddha said there's only the middle way towards enlightenment. And what he meant is anywhere your attention goes, it wants to like a chemical react with phenomena. Unless you realize your true liberated nature. There was a person named Shri Prabhupada. He was kind of like the inspiration for the Hare Krishna movement, I believe in the 70s or 80s or whatever. And so this man, I don't know how to say it. Shri Prabhupada. I don't know how to say it. It always leads towards a sort of multidimensional spectrum where eventually the various dimensions wonder about each other, they unite, and suddenly, as they unite, whatever state of being we find ourselves, due to the sense of updating that we require for the continuity of our survival, because of that updating, we're pulled. So on some level, it's like the context of language fades, the concepts in language fade, and then there's just the geometrical design. What if I told you every sentence ever in language, it has a geometrical design to it? It has a sort of architecture to it. It's as if language is like structures we live in, you know? We have philosophers like Ludwig Wittgenstein saying the limits of my language are the limits of my world. We have scholars like Terence McKenna saying that a culture and a civilization evolves as fast as its language does, you know? And we have the poet Hafiz from 700 years ago saying the words you speak in become the house you live in. So what that means is we impose the limitation based on how we responded to it. And so the character that you set yourself as is your mindset. And the best way is to realize that you have to take the efficient approach, and the efficient approach doesn't mean always acting on impulse. You have to watch yourself prior to manifestation, because there's your presence of your mind. It's as if first stand as a conscious mind, then stand up to go live through the day. And that conscious mind is the ability of self-awareness, which is always updating in accordance to the environments you go to, and pretty much how the experience of the moment just moves forward. I want communities to develop all over this planet where the most deepest conversations are challenging every existential belief. Because let me tell you, language is a simulation. What that means is if it breaks, nothing happens. The worst thing that can happen to language is that it fades out of memory. And the worst thing that can happen for memory is that it gets locked into language. And so we have to realize the balance that is required, because certain archetypes will eventually change. What that means is the way the ancient Greeks saw the gods is not the way that we see the gods today. So what that means is they saw a cloud and they saw that it could kind of like the feet of the gods could be on it, you know? There was something unique with the permission that their intelligence gave them to see how much the world could be animate, as if before we had even a way of classifying what is imagination, it was all the moment's truth. The singular jumped into the multidimensional jumped into the singular. The cycles of this world continued endlessly, and we realized that we were never here. The value of life is, to be honest, to trust your life, and then it opens up to you. The best way I've kind of realized that the mind, the best metaphor, is that it's like a lotus. And it's a lotus that is closed and it requires to be opened. But it's opened not in accordance to your intellectual capacity to scope various landscapes of the branches of knowledge, but simply with how much you're willing to adjust your behavior to a way that it aligns with the naturalness of your attention, right? And this has no story to it. Literally, like, there's nothing to do about it aside from you observing how your mind is being the moment. So Mr. Within is saying, try to find a mirror of your mind. And the ancient yogis said that was kind of through stillness and silence. This doesn't mean take it to the extreme, because some people take it as spirituality. They think it's a parachute for the afterlife. Like, what is this? A lot of people entertain spirituality because of their cultural identity is dying and they don't know what to do, so they have to be spiritual. Like, it's like there's no such spirituality like that. Every man is weaving his own story in space and time. We are on some level in our own worlds again, but we are all facing one world. That's the cool thing, right? You know, that means if there was a God, this God likes spheres. I'm telling you, this geometrically, the God was like, okay, instead of the world being like cubes, I'm gonna make it into spheres. You know? This is a very, I find, interesting statement that you don't have to listen to your ideas. What it means is you are either moving experientially in this life, or you're moving in some sense indirectly as a context. Like either the context of life is moving for you, or conceptually it's changing. Chaos and to find order. And all those people who feel that the purpose of evolution was to find order, they become instantly, they go towards the multidimensional journey towards God. When I say God, I mean literally they consider one singular point of inconceivable intelligence as the projector of the whole manifest reality. So that's like a heavy thing, you know, but people don't realize that because they embrace the idea not realizing its subconscious implication. I wanted to share an interesting idea. I've had moments where I've really literally like sat still and silent, and I've literally had no preference to do anything. And in that moment, I realized regardless of how much I don't want to do anything, this world is animate. That means even if you try not to do something, the world still changes. If you do something, the world still changes. So regardless, the world is still changing. Most human beings, their psychology comes to a great conclusion of it, which is like, okay, we're here, let's have fun at least. Right? So this is one thing about the Western mindset that is incredible, is that they remind their children that there is a sort of joy to life that comes from engaging it. You know? The Eastern mindset is a bit different. There comes a joy to life from disengaging life. You see, it's like one part of the world was trying to get out of this world. The one part of this world was trying to like, you know, it's like, okay, check this out. A part of the population of the world wanted to journey to the center of the earth, and a part of the population wanted to journey to the sky. One was seeking the truth of the past, the other was trying to, in some sense, create the truth of the future. Because we're in a modern time right now, we have to all be creators. I'm not joking. Literally, it's like you have a responsibility as a creature that evolved to this point after 4 billion years to create. And the emergence of creation has to come behaviorally, and this is the issue with culture and society. The role of the artist is not proper. You know, I remember Terence McKenna said in one of his lectures called "Doors Opening the Doors to Creativity." Terence McKenna is someone who I feel is he's a man who sees a lot, and so, anyways, Terence McKenna, he said the poets have failed us, and that sentence just like it stayed with me. The poets have failed us. It was kind of like I was dishonored by that sentence. And so let me tell you what happened. Because in my mind, I wondered why, and I realized it's not that the poets have failed us. It's that the poets have failed themselves. And what that means is the archetype and the image of the artist in society has been reduced to street alleys. It's as if we have forgotten the value of vision, the value of novelty. Do you know how many children in the world are drawing next level artwork and nobody ever gets to see it? At most they just upload it online and don't know what to do with it, right? So what I'm saying is there's incredible potential, kind of potential energy, which has to suddenly be turned kinetic. It turns kinetic with intentions, and intentions at most are being like a lot influenced by the environment. Right now, even I'm speaking to you, who I conceive the audience to be, or in some sense the ears of the world to be, is literally limiting the levels that I feel I can speak. You see, I feel our intelligence has a geometry to it. That means there's a geometry to every thought ever known. There's a character in this kind of sci-fi thing I've written where his name is Lord Mistos, Mistos. And so this character, he's a strange art. I had this unique idea of making an archangel archetype, but this archangel is the archangel of geometry. So for example, how we had certain angels, archangels, kind of like be messengers to certain characters in the world. So similarly in this landscape, kind of playful landscape I've drawn as for more at most as self-reflective value. To continue, guys, sorry for these intermissions, but they're required. Lord Mistos, he was the archangel of geometry, and in some sense, the way he entered the kind of character, I had this main character called Farda, you know, this kind of like enlightened kid. And so anyways, whenever this kid went through some sort of challenge at random moments in his storyline, in his in his storyline, like this what's his name, Lord Mistos, this archangel, kind of geometrically appears. That means literally everything in the moment, like right when the kid's about to die in the storyline, suddenly the whole world turns geometric and this guy comes and saves them or something. What I'm trying to say is, like, we can say creativity and imagination is another angle of at reality, looking at reality. And what that means is there's a freedom to see things in a different way. That means there's a freedom to completely set a new design in motion. So imagine that everybody, all these world leaders that gather around in these peace conferences, for a second, they're like, okay, imagine if we truly were world leaders who are gathering in this peace conference. It's like we are all telling a story to ourselves of the ultimate value of the world. And most of them are culturally influenced and, of course, resource oriented, and there's this giant chess game of economics to play. But I'm saying, like, there's more to life than just a system that appears successful, even though the weather can change anytime. The quality of human beings, their life, the cosmos. I wake up, I do, like, I am animate, and then I go to sleep and it's like I'm inanimate, you know? It's like deep sleep is kind of like experiencing what just being an object is like. It's a blank gap. And there are gaps between thoughts, just like there's spaces between words in a sentence. Everything, once your mind opens up to a design, it can see that design through anything. The value of the mind is kind of, I find, eventually finding a path of exploration. In order to keep your mind alive, you have to sincerely advance, one can say. When there comes a shift in the mindset of every human being, that their value is also a creation of the world, your desires are also how the world is happening. Therefore, the moment there's a consideration and a chance that everything is connected and as if we're all particles in a field of intelligence, then in that instant, all ideological, all particular ways of looking at life will become void. So it's as if the experience reaches a level where the interpretation of existence cannot be fragmented anymore. So we, in some sense, go back into a sort of singular dimension, conceptually speaking. I had an experience in Rishikesh in India, and for some reason, strangely, I had the opportunity to go into the meditation hall of this place called Divine Life Society. And I went there to India for this yoga program, and the ashram was right beside this place. And I went into the meditation hall of this place, and I just sat down, and I just watched. And for a second, I kind of looked at everything there, and I realized, like, that the value of the self is in how you keep it active. And it doesn't matter if it's like an engineer in Europe working on a car's design or if it's some dude in India worshiping things. Everybody is trying to find some activity. So we are in some sense attention and activity oriented creatures, and the quality of that activity dictates our preferences. So people are being defined by their past. So if the quality of the past is bad, they're going to have bad expectations. So in some sense, people have to forget their past and constantly reemerge into a viewpoint where there's an authorization for efficiency. So in military tactics, kind of, they have this saying where they say that if you want to kill a snake, you cut the head of the snake. What that means is recognize where your problem has emerged and go straight to the origin of the problem. When you go straight to the origin of the problem, it's kind of like you're asking, why is a phenomenon occurring? So you're in some sense again going into this explorative kind of, in your own unique way, scientifically exploring reality, but also the subjective realm. So how you study the subjective realm is that at most you either sit still and silent and you watch the movie occur behind your eyes until that movie stops and like the ripples of the pond settle, and then beyond that it's like you go beyond the language threshold and your intuition has already moved you before any words before you need any words. And so there's a moment like that, but before that, before the language thresholds, reality is in some sense world exploration. So this idea of silence, I'm telling you, all meditations, all yogic thought comes down to silence. This is a concept where I'm not sure many people have ever thought about, but I'll kind of share it. It's kind of this notion of inner mastery. So imagine you see a human being. Imagine if you're in Western society, you see, like, for example, what is it, like Superman is like the primary media archetype. The one who has ultimate power but also has ultimate behavioral values. So it's as if like the most perfect robot that everybody can look at and be like, yeah, that's a perfect robot. But eventually you see it's like the point of life is not celebrating a momentary illusion to have value. It's like pretty much you have to reach a sort of designer's mindset before you have any story to have bias in. When one is purely silent, there is no thought. And when there is no thought, for the first time the attention feels it is free, not by doing things, but by not doing things. It's sort of kind of like Lao Tzu's Taoistic action through inaction. It's like just stop doing the wrong thing and then maybe you'll see what the right thing is. You give a permission for the world to dance anew in your eyes, you know. So many people, they have cruel experiences when they're young and they don't forgive the world because they think the world owes their mind, like the world has to listen. How far can language take us? And where is it taking us? This poet Rumi has this quote where he says, out beyond ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there is a place. I'll meet you there. And, and when the soul sits on that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Literally, it means opinionless kind of observance. Another set of words I have for this is like set of words. If you ever wonder about what's behind your eyes, you will truly realize the value of what's in front of it. Much blessings and namaste.